Hello and welcome to another episode of the SITREP. Today we are joined by Kate Alves. Kate, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Not a problem. And Kate is with us today to talk about the HUD-VASH program. We'll be speaking in general terms. She might bring up some examples from the Boston area, but definitely check out the team that you have locally with regard to HUD-VASH to find out the specifics for your area. Again, Kate, thanks for being here. Let's jump into it, shall we?
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. So for people that aren't in the know, what does HUD-VASH stand for and what is the program all about?
Sure. So HUD-VASH, it's a partnership between the Department of Housing and Urban Development and VA. So it stands for HUD is Housing and Urban Development. VASH is VA supported housing. So it's a partnership between Department of Housing and Urban Development and the VA to provide supportive services and a Section 8 voucher to veterans who are experiencing homelessness.
So this is kind of like VA's version of Section 8, I guess?
Yeah, yep. Although the difference between standard Section 8 and a HUD-VASH voucher is really the supports that come along with it. So it is a Section 8 voucher, but along with it, again, is supports through the VA. So every veteran who's issued a HUD-VASH voucher has a social worker working with them, as well as kind of wraparound services from peer support specialists, occupational therapists, nursing, kind of did I say occupational therapist? Yes. I think I did. Yeah, a wide variety of supports and wraparound services along with the Section 8 voucher.
Now, is that a requirement? If I'm a veteran comes in and I'm like, hey, I want to utilize, the HUD-VASH benefit, but I don't really want everything else that goes with it. Can I just do that, or is the wraparound services like a requirement for the program?
So the case management's a requirement. It's kind of as much or as little as someone needs. So we're not going to mandate any resources or supports that someone doesn't need. But the compliance with case management goes along with the voucher for us. So it is a part of it. Again, it could be someone meeting with you as infrequently as like once a month, just kind of checking in and making sure everything's going smoothly. If somebody needs more intensive case management or more intensive supports, then they would meet more frequently. So kind of as much or as little as someone needs, but there is that requirement to comply with case management. When someone graduates from our program, so if somebody, say you get your voucher, everything's going well, you've been living in your apartment for a year or longer, and you and your case manager discuss your goals and everything's going smoothly, you can graduate from the active case management to be kind of in the more independent phase. So you still would have someone to call if something came up or if you needed anything or had any questions, but also then that intensive case management wouldn't be required any longer.
And if you graduate, is it something that you're able, if need be, re-enter the program?
Yes. Yep. So if something came up, if someone's housing became unstable or something else changed, then we could like re-enter them to case management again. Yes.
Okay. And so, I alluded to earlier, I imagine that from state to state and community to community, the processes and the policies might be a little bit different. But in a general sense, how does obtaining a HUD-VASH voucher work? Wow, say that 10 times fast. HUD-VASH voucher work?
So it's, I think, pretty standard across the country as far as like no wrong door. So usually folks would be referred to HUD-VASH through either community providers, their VA providers. We have a VA homeless hotline that folks could call. So there's really no wrong access point. From there, every VA probably differs about what the next steps are. There's an application from each for each VA facility. But again, you'd be filling out a kind of preliminary application to get awareness to your local HUD-VASH to then be screened for HUD-VASH and move forward from there. So no wrong door, but also probably every VA is slightly different.
About how long does it take for someone, hey, all right, I've stepped through a door, no matter what door that is, I've stepped through that door and I've applied. What can I expect?
So wait times, would vary. It kind of depends on acuity. So again, I think every VA we have mandated priorities. So we prioritize veterans who are experiencing street homelessness. So if someone's street homeless or staying in a place that's not meant for human habitation, veterans who are elderly, families, veterans who are chronically homeless. So if they've been homeless for 1 year or longer. So kind of depending on prioritization is kind of would be able to show how quickly or slowly someone's application might move. What I like to tell veterans is VASH isn't a fast process, but it's a permanent long-term support. So if somebody is in need of shelter like tonight or in need of a place to stay urgently, we have emergency shelters or transitional programs for that. HUD-VASH isn't that quick solution because there's once you're moving through the program, we'd have to work with our local housing authority to get all the documents they need to be able to issue them a voucher. Then you have a support that's helping you with housing search. So you'd have, a social worker, a peer who's working with you to help with finding an apartment. But that can be, as you can imagine, at least a couple months sometimes to find an apartment. It has to be inspected by the housing authority. And then from there, you sign a lease and you're moving in. So it can be a little bit of a process to get there.
What exactly is VA's definition of homeless?
So we go by the McKinney-Vento, which is a federal definition of homelessness. So there's a lot of different subcategories of that. But basically, it's someone is in a shelter or transitional program. If somebody is street homeless or staying in a place not meant for human habitation, like a car or, somewhere else like a tent or something outdoors. If those are kind of the biggies. If somebody is in danger of homelessness, like being evicted, they would have to have documentation of being evicted and have to be within 14 days of the end of that eviction period. So those are, again, our primary ones. I could go more into it, but again, those are the biggies.
So what if I'm a veteran who's basically couch surfing, like spending a week at one person's house, a week over here, a week over there? Maybe I'm at a shelter another week and then I'm back, like a rotation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so it's a case-by-case basis, and I think probably every VA is slightly different in this area too, of kind of like feeling those out. So we will talk with the veteran and kind of get a feel on where they're staying. We understand, again, if someone's staying in their car, they may then go stay with their friend for one night to be able to have a warm place to stay or a shower, but we know they're not like permanently staying there. So that's very different than somebody who's like, I'm staying in my parents' second bedroom and I've been there for 5+ years and I'm just ready to move out. Like we kind of feel out the difference between if somebody is staying with a family member, but that's kind of permanent-ish versus somebody staying, temporarily or a night or two here or there. So really we kind of talk with the veteran. That's part of our screening process is we do like an intake where we'll kind of talk through someone's housing history. And again, we want to be able to prioritize folks who need the vouchers the most. So again, we've had sometimes veterans who it's been unstable housing, but also unfortunately doesn't meet our homeless definition, which is always tricky. And we'll try to work with them and provide resources to make sure, we can support someone if they're in an unstable situation, maybe to try to even prevent homelessness or try to point them in a direction of other affordable housing options that might not be HUD-VASH.
Okay. And, it's something that you've already kind of said, but I want to expand on a little bit. And that is, how long can a veteran use HUD-VASH?
So they can use it forever as long as they continue to be eligible. So once someone's in an apartment or stably housed, again, as long as they're income eligible and compliant with the housing authority, compliant with our program, which again can be as much or as little as someone needs as far as like just staying in touch with their case manager or just staying in touch with the program if there's any issues that come up, then there's no end for their eligibility. So as long as someone continues to be income eligible, they continue to need it, they can continue to have that HUD-VASH voucher.
Can you kind of expand on that? What is eligibility?
Sure. So for entry into the program, income eligibility is an individual, at least for Boston area, I think it's different throughout the country, but I can speak to Boston. Income eligibility is if somebody is making less than $91,200 annually for one individual. So it's pretty high.
Wow.
I know. And so once they're in the program, do you want me to explain a little bit about how the voucher works and
That's
how payment
insane.
works? Yeah,
$91,000?
So I think the thing that I like to point out to folks too is, so just to back up how the voucher works. So the veteran pays 1/3 of their income toward the rent, and then the voucher covers the rest. So if they're making that like $91,000 a year, they're paying 1/3 of their monthly income toward the rent, which probably would almost be close to the full rental amount that they'd be paying.
Right.
So the voucher is like worth less to them than if somebody had zero income, or they're making, $12,000 a year or something, where their income is far less. So the voucher is worth a lot more to them. So they're paying 1/3 of their income toward the rent, and then the voucher covers the rest.
Okay.
So again, back to income or eligibility. So if somebody, to stay in the program, as long as the voucher is paying at least $1 toward their rent amount, then they continue to be eligible for HUD-VASH. We've had, though, folks that sometimes after they like increase their income after they're housed, and they say, you know what, like, I think I got this, I don't need this anymore, or like the, $10 a month I'm getting from the voucher isn't worth it for me to go through all the paperwork and all the, like, there's a annual recertification with the housing authority, which is something that any housing authority would require. So sometimes they say, like, all this paperwork, all the hoops, maybe this isn't worth it for me anymore because I'm making close to the full rental amount. So I can swing it on my own. So again, it's voluntary for folks to stay in the program too.
And so that's for an individual. What about, a family?
Yep. So it doesn't double every like additional person that's on. I know for two family, it's the maximum income is right about $104,000 for a family of two. I think then I don't know the rest off the top of my head, but I can look into it if you want. Or
No, that's fine.
It's like 110-ish for three people in a family.
Okay. And what about VA disability? Does that count towards your income or no?
Yes and no. So here's the tricky part. So it doesn't count when we look at someone being eligible. So if someone's getting like Social Security disability and VA service connection, when we're combining that amount, it doesn't count toward that $91,200. So it doesn't count for eligibility, but it does count toward their monthly rental portion and how the housing authority calculates their monthly rental portion. So it wouldn't be counted to then say someone's over income, but also once they're in the program and accepted, then the housing authority calculates any money that's coming in, they're paying about 1/3 of that towards the rental portion.
And so, so it sounds like there's an element of this that is overseen and taken care of or managed by HUD. Mm-hmm. And then there's a other part that is managed by VA.
Correct. Yeah.
So can you distinguish which is which?
Yeah, sure. So pretty much anything related to the voucher is managed by HUD. So they manage kind of anything related to eligibility about finances. They calculate a veteran's rental portion. They do the payment to the landlord. So they also do an inspection of a potential unit to make sure it passes inspection on their end as far as just being like suitable for housing, and that the amount the landlord is asking for is a reasonable rent amount. So the housing authority really manages anything financially related to the voucher. VA manages anything clinical and anything related to the veteran's experience throughout this. So we provide the supports related to the whole process. So VA, we are the ones who kind of screen the veteran beforehand. We bring the veteran to the housing authority to say, this veteran is going to be moving forward next for us. Let's issue him a voucher or her a voucher. And so we then support the veteran with gathering all the documents they need to get to the housing authority. We help address any clinical needs that are related to their experience of homelessness and to prevent future homelessness. And we work with the veteran ongoing once their voucher is issued, again, just if any issues arise or just to provide any wraparound supports to maintain their permanent housing.
Okay. And to clarify, the voucher isn't for said amount of money. It's just that it offsets at a certain percentage. And
yeah, so the veteran pays 1/3 of their income toward the rent, and then the voucher pays the rest. So a landlord is getting 2 payments every month. They're getting the veteran's portion and the housing authority's portion, which combined is then what the rent is that the landlord's asking for.
So there are a lot of benefits that exist, such as CHAMP VA, that VA offers to dependents of veterans. Is HUD-VASH one of those benefits that the dependent of a veteran could utilize, or is it just for veterans?
It's primarily just for veterans. So a dependent couldn't apply on their own or couldn't be issued a voucher on their own. The veteran can add anybody they want to their voucher and have any family member or any family composition that they define. We do have, if a veteran passes away and they've been housed in their HUD-VASH apartment, and the family member continues to need that voucher, we do have a handful of family members that maintain the voucher after the veteran has passed away. But that's again on a case-by-case basis. And I think the veteran has to have been housed for at least a year on the voucher for us to then continue with the family member.
Okay, so situational for family members. What about friends? If I have a HUD-VASH voucher and I'm like, hey, my buddy Bob wants to move into the other room.
Yeah. Yep. So the veteran can add anybody they want to their voucher. It doesn't have to be a family member. It doesn't have to be a dependent. It doesn't have to be a significant other. It can be a roommate, a friend. The thing is their income is combined and included in the rental portion. So it has to be another probably person who's low income, or again, if your income combined, if there's 2 of you, it would be about $104,000 locally at VA Boston. But again, it's up to the veteran to define their family. We do have a handful of folks that we can, like 2 veterans saying, I want to live together and support each other through this, stressful circumstance of experiencing homelessness. So we do have veterans who decide to, be roommates too. So.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Is there a max, like if I'm in the HUD-VASH program and I find a multi-million-dollar mansion, that somebody decided to, put up for availability, could I rent it?
So again, that's where the housing authority comes in. So the housing authority gives the veteran, they issue them the voucher. They give them what the rental amount is per area they're looking for. So they go by kind of like area rental amounts and determine if you're looking for a 1-bedroom in this area, this is the max amount that we'll pay from the housing authority. So again, we do have landlords that reach out to us to say, I want to rent my house to a veteran. My family member is a veteran. I really care about veterans. I want to give back, and this is my way to do that. Can I rent to a veteran with a HUD-VASH voucher? And the answer is absolutely yes. We love to hear that, and we love landlords that are looking to rent to veterans. It just kind of has to be in line with what the housing authority determines is the average rent amount for that particular area.
So it's not at the low end or the top end of the bell curve, but
no, it's pretty average. Yeah, okay. And they'll look at kind of comparable rents in the area. So I think it's pretty average and pretty reasonable for the market.
So with utilizing the HUD-VASH program, are there any fees or special payments that need to be made or anything like that? Or is it just a straight out benefit, cost you nothing to utilize?
So no, it costs nothing to the veteran beyond the veteran just has to pay their rental portion. So they pay, again, about 1/3 of their income toward the rent. But other than that, there's no hidden fees, nothing else, just paying 1/3 of their rental 1/3 of their income toward the rental portion.
VA has a program, SSVF. Mm-hmm. First off, can you explain what SSVF is? And also, can that be used in conjunction with HUD-VASH?
Sure. Yes. So SSVF stands for Supportive Services for Veterans and Families. It's a grant through the VA that then we work with partner agencies to administer funds to veterans. We work really closely with them. So SSVF and HUD-VASH partner really well together. They often will refer veterans who are working with HUD-VASH to SSVF to help with security deposits, moving costs, any kind of sometimes like a application fee or like a lock and key fee, sometimes like out of pocket expenses that add up right at the beginning of moving into an apartment. So we work closely with SSVF because they can help with those one-time payments to get veterans into an apartment. So we will refer often to SSVF.
And does that include it's not something that we necessarily think about. It's like, hey, all right, we put you in a house or an apartment or condo or whatever. Here's the key. But then it's empty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You need beds, you need a microwave,
Correct.
you need all this stuff. SSVF can help with that kind of stuff?
They can, yep. So that's, again, the nice part of the VA partnering with the HUD and the voucher is the supports that are in place too. So the nice part is you have a social worker working with you to help make sure that we'll get you a bed. So our local SSVF partners will pay for beds and will order a new bed for a veteran to move into an apartment. We also work with furniture banks and local charities and nonprofits that do donate gently used furniture. SSVF will help pay for movers to pick up that furniture and bring it to that apartment. So it's often really nice, lovely furniture to kind of make an empty apartment into a home that somebody is proud of and feels safe there and happy to be there. So again, we couldn't do it without SSVF partnerships for sure that help with all the other little odds and ends to get us into that apartment. But again, also furniture banks, they also take donations and, get folks the things they need to make an apartment into a home.
So for an individual that's out there, I know you said there's no wrong door, but they're looking to get into the program or apply to it. What's the straightest path to doing that?
If they're already connected to the VA, talking to any VA provider, they could point you toward your homeless services programs at your local VA. So if you, again, go to primary care, you could ask your primary care doctor or primary care office social worker to put in a consult for homeless services at your local VA. If you aren't connected to a VA at all, then again, we have an 800 number, which is a way to connect with your, they'll route you to your local VA as far as VA homeless services. So you'll get an outreach call from somebody from VA homeless services who would give you a call. At Boston VA, and I know Bedford VA, I'm sure several others have housing walk-in clinic hours too. Again, so someone could present to the VA, meet with someone from housing to talk through their specific housing needs. So they could apply for HUD-VASH, but also talk about emergency shelters or transitional programs or other places to stay in the meantime too while you're waiting on HUD-VASH or working on HUD-VASH.
So HUD-VASH isn't something that you actually have to be enrolled in VA healthcare to utilize?
You don't.
Or I imagine enrollment probably is part of the process of...
It is, but so a wrinkle is you don't have to be eligible for VA healthcare to be eligible for HUD-VASH.
Okay.
So that's something to make sure people know. Yeah. So anyone who's eligible for VA healthcare, again, and also experiencing homelessness, would be eligible for HUD-VASH. However, you don't have to be eligible for VA healthcare to be eligible for HUD-VASH. So if somebody has at least 1 day of active duty time and anything other than a dishonorable discharge, they're eligible for HUD-VASH. So somebody could be eligible for HUD-VASH and not eligible for VA healthcare.
Interesting. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, yep. So in that case, again, I think if somebody wasn't sure if they were eligible, probably calling would be the best place to start, to talk to someone on the phone and kind of say, I'm not sure if I'm eligible. I know I'm not eligible for VA healthcare, but maybe I'm eligible for VASH still. So it's worth looking into. And that's also fairly new. The expanded eligibility for HUD-VASH, I'd say it's about 3 years old. So there are a lot of people that I think were probably told they weren't eligible for VASH 5-10 years ago that may now be eligible. So something for people to know.
Worth the call.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
Okay. Is HUD-VASH something that I can lose?
Yes. So it would be if somebody it wasn't compliant with the program requirements as far as, so if somebody wasn't paying their rental portion or got evicted from an apartment and wasn't compliant with the supports that we're working with them to try to prevent that from happening. So it's rare, but it happens. So usually it's if somebody is just really out of contact with us and then also loses their apartment for whatever reason. If somebody's struggling and they're struggling to pay rent or struggling with substance use or mental health or some other thing that's an obstacle for them in paying their rent or having any kind of other like behavioral issues in the apartment, if they're willing to work with us, we'll work with them to try to support them through it, to try to get them whatever treatment they may need to prevent that from happening again, and can work with them to find another apartment. So really, it's if somebody struggles with losing their apartment and also isn't like willing to work with the wraparound services to support them through it, is really when someone would lose their voucher. At least for us at VA Boston, someone is always welcome to reapply. So it's not, you're not gone forever. If somebody lost their voucher, they struggled the first time around, they're welcome to reapply. We do a review where we'll meet with the veteran and kind of talk through like what happened last time. How can we prevent that from happening again? Maybe it's getting a rep payee, so somebody will help them with paying their rental portion so they won't struggle this time around with paying the rent, or just kind of like learning from past experiences. So again, even if someone loses their voucher, it doesn't mean they're like, blacklisted forever. It just means we would learn from that and talk with them to try to prevent it from happening again.
You had said earlier in our conversation, graduating. What does that mean?
So graduating would be somebody who's able to be independently housed, but maybe still needs the voucher. So they're somebody who's paying their rental portion. They're doing anything that anyone's asking them to do. Everything's going really smoothly. So they don't need that like intensive level of case management, but they still need the voucher. So they can like independently stay housed. They keep the voucher as long as they need it, but they graduate from that like intensive case management piece. But they could always call us. Again, for our graduate program, we have a social worker who reaches out to folks periodically. I believe it's once every 3 months or once every 6 months, just to kind of like give a phone call and say like, hey, we're still here. If you need anything, let me know. Everything going good? Great. Okay, I'll call you in a couple months. So kind of just still here as a safety net if there's a need, but also if you don't need us and everything's going smoothly, then keep on doing what's working.
With HUD-VASH, is it something that I can relocate for or relocate while on? And how does that work? Yeah.
So after being housed for 1 year in any location, you are able to port your voucher to another location. It would have to be kind of each VA has to communicate with each other, and each housing authority has to communicate with each other to make sure that the VASH program where you want to go to has vouchers available. And then the housing authorities kind of communicate around the voucher piece. So yes, it's possible to port your voucher from one VA location. So, say you're in Massachusetts and you say, yeah, I want to go somewhere warmer. Let me port my voucher down to Florida or something. It's tricky, but doable. It just kind of depends on the receiving VA also having vouchers available and being able to do that.
So there's only a set number?
Yes. So each VA has a set number of vouchers that are issued to them nationally that they manage. So they have vouchers on site.
But if I live in Dallas, Texas, and I want to, my family actually, lives in Massachusetts, and I want to move to Massachusetts and go into a HUD-VASH program. Maybe, am I able to just relocate and jump into it, or do I need to be like a Massachusetts resident for a period of time, or how does that work?
I think each VA probably answers that a little bit differently. For us, we do require that the person be experiencing homelessness in our local area, particularly when their like name comes to the top of the list and when we start doing housing search and start doing the process of having them like enroll in the HUD-VASH program. They have to be local to our area to do that. So we can help with if somebody's homeless in Texas and they want to come to Massachusetts because that's where all their supports are. Again, I think reaching out to your homeless program either at VA in Texas or the homeless office here at VA in Massachusetts, we can help with getting emergency shelters or transitional programs here to be able to be here to then establish HUD-VASH here. So there's no like set in stone, they have to be a Massachusetts resident for X amount of days or months or whatever. But just from our experience, as somebody's going through the HUD-VASH process, they need to be physically here to help with all the documentation gathering, housing search, and to be able to like kind of establish supports in this area to get to successfully be housed here.
That makes sense. If I'm a young veteran and I'm going to school, whether I'm using the GI Bill or Veteran Readiness and Employment Program, is HUD-VASH something I'm also able to utilize at the same time? And does my educational benefits count towards my income for HUD-VASH?
So if you're getting any like housing stipend related to that, then that would count toward your income. Again, this is more of a housing authority question, so I'm not an expert with it, but my understanding is if you're getting any like educational benefit that's going directly to the school or going directly to your classes, that's not counted as income. But if you're getting like a housing stipend or something else additionally, then they count that as income. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
It totally makes sense. And so then as long as you're underneath the threshold for your geographic region, then
you're good. Yes.
All right. So as a veteran that is, entering the HUD-VASH program, what are the expectations and requirements to, be successful in that program?
I'd say my advice would really be just communication and communicate with your VA points of contact. So again, you'll have a case manager, usually a social worker. You'd have a peer support specialist. Just really being in touch with them, and they'll walk you through the process and every like document you'll need, the next steps along the way. It can be an overwhelming process. So that's really where having the wraparound supports from VA providers can make it much more, easily to be navigated than doing it on your own. So I'd say communication above all, and just staying in touch with your providers who can kind of walk you through next steps. So they'll, meet with you to help with gathering the documents you need, like bank statements, birth certificate, social security card, ID, things like that. Then also once you have the voucher, they'll meet with you regularly to conduct a housing search, to explain how to explain the voucher to a landlord, how to kind of answer any questions a landlord might have. And then once you're in your apartment, they'll kind of meet with you regularly in your apartment or at VA or out in the community just to make sure everything's going smoothly with staying in that apartment too. So really above all, I think staying in touch with the VA providers who've been doing this and are in there with you to support you through it all.
So earlier we were speaking about, the amount of time that it takes to get into the program. And there is a process, not only with paperwork that has to be done with HUD, but you're also searching for a place and all that kind of stuff. And so, if I'm someone that's in the audience right now and it's like, well, I don't have that kind of time, what kind of emergency options, and I know this is going to be different from VA to VA, but in a general sense, what kind of emergency options exist at VA and in the community?
Sure. So I believe almost every VA has like contracted emergency beds. So we have beds that are set aside at area shelters specifically for veterans in the community. So again, could get you a bed tonight somewhere in an emergency shelter, veteran-specific emergency shelter beds. We also have, they're called grant and per diem programs that are transitional housing programs for veterans where a veteran can stay up to 2 years. They have support services on site, and they can help with establishing medical care or connecting to like long-term housing programs too.
Is that like through a nonprofit of some sort? Or
Yep. So it's a grant through the VA. So again, kind of similar to the emergency set-aside beds. They're grantees that have applied for a grant through the VA where the VA pays a per diem rate for veterans to have a bed and have supports. So those are throughout the country too. So grant and per diem programs would be, again, transitional programs where a veteran can stay up to 2 years.
What is the efficacy for or differences or advantages of HUD-VASH over other options that exist just for civilians?
I mean, I think the biggest is the supportive services. I feel like this is what I've said a million times, sorry. But the wraparound services from the VA is really what sets it apart from a standard Section 8 voucher. So a standard Section 8 voucher, yes, you're getting your rental portion paid exactly as a HUD-VASH voucher would be paid. But there's also supports from the VA just to address any like root causes and reasons for someone experiencing homelessness. So whether it's employment support or helping increase someone's income, applying for benefits, or also addressing reasons that maybe they've struggled with paying rent in the past, whether it's, again, substance related, mental health related, whatever their needs might be, just to prevent homelessness from happening again. So it's not just like a Band-Aid, like here's a cheap apartment, but it's also the supports to prevent homelessness from happening again.
SSVF, is it just for veterans with families, or can a single veteran also utilize SSVF?
Good question. A single veteran can utilize SSVF. It stands for Supportive Services for Veterans and Families, but it doesn't have to be a veteran with a family. So an individual can also utilize SSVF.
Is a veteran able to distinguish who their family is, or is it like legit blood related?
No, so they can distinguish it's their household, whatever that looks like for them. So it doesn't have to be, again, it can be a roommate, it can be a friend, it can be a significant other, it can be their children, it can be their stepchildren, it can be whatever that family looks like for them. So it's their household, basically.
So we've kind of danced around it a little bit. HUD-VASH and substance use, whether it's alcohol or some type of street drug or what have you. Do I have to be a sober individual in order to utilize HUD-VASH?
So there's no sobriety requirement, but again, you'll meet with a clinical social worker to talk through maybe what's leading to someone experiencing homelessness or what's going on to prevent obtaining permanent housing. So there's no you have to be sober for 6 months in order to move forward with HUD-VASH. So there's no set in stone sobriety requirement. Again, we have peer support specialists, substance use specialists. Our hope is to establish rapport with someone and talk through what's going on that's led to someone experiencing homelessness, to then say what are your goals? How can we keep you housed? How can we work with you to achieve those goals? And maybe part of that is sobriety. Of course, we never want anyone to be in an unsafe situation. So we will have frank conversations with folks of hey, the substance use that's going on right now makes me concerned for your well-being, and I want to make sure you're safe in an apartment. The hope of the program is to have a stable, solid housing to build, a nice foundation from, to then maybe that can be the basis to build your sobriety off of, or that can be the basis to build your next goals on. So again, there's no sobriety requirement that's a hard and fast rule, but we hope that by establishing permanent housing, having safety, having a roof over your head might make someone rethink their goals and hopefully try to work toward their recovery, whatever that looks like for them.
I imagine maybe a concern for some people that are entertaining HUD-VASH is their privacy. If I go in the HUD-VASH program, is any of my history or my reason for being homeless or any of that going to be disclosed to who the landlord is?
No. So but good question though. So a veteran does have to sign a release of information for us to communicate with the landlord, and they're able to specify what's shared or not shared. So on our end, all we are sharing is this person is a veteran. He's in our HUD-VASH program. It's not only, not okay for us to share any like medical or clinical information with a landlord. It's illegal for us to share any medical or clinical information with a landlord. So we really respect people's privacy and respect people's autonomy and would make sure to protect that information. So there's no reason for us to disclose any information to a landlord besides they're in our program, they're a veteran, they're eligible for HUD-VASH, they have a voucher, here's how the voucher works, here are the supports that are in place. I think the nice part of HUD-VASH that I like to explain to a landlord is also the supports that are in place for a landlord too. So if they have questions about how the voucher works, if they have any issue about any like behavior or concern, which again, we hope doesn't happen, but say there's a disturbance with a veteran's guest coming over or something like that. Like there's a third party that can help intervene and support all people in this scenario to just try to make things go as smoothly as possible.
If I'm utilizing the HUD-VASH program and I have a hospitalization, whether it's physical health or mental health or whatever the case may be, is that going to create a problem for my voucher, or will I be able to continue with it?
Nope, you could continue with the voucher. Again, the nice part of having the voucher and a social worker working with you is to help with those hiccups that might happen along the way. So if someone's in the hospital and they need help with like communicating to their landlord, hey, his rent might be late by a week because he's in the hospital right now, or hey, he's in the hospital. If you haven't seen him around, that's why. Like we can help with communicating or navigating any issues. Again, with the veteran's permission, we can let the landlord know. But no, being in the hospital wouldn't affect any issue with the voucher.
So if I'm a veteran who entered into the HUD-VASH program, and perhaps whether it's my case manager or someone that I'm working with, I kind of just don't jive with them. Am I able to work with someone different or request someone different, or am I kind of just stuck with what I got?
It depends. I mean, I think my advice would be to first talk with that case manager, but then also if you don't feel comfortable doing that, talking with their supervisor, and they can maybe try to mediate any issue that's going on, or in some cases we can switch case managers. It really just depends on availability and circumstances. So it's doable. The other thing is also, again, there's a team of supports usually working with a veteran. So we have a peer support specialist that could be like kind of your primary point of contact. And maybe once a month you talk to your case manager that maybe you don't jive with as well, but you talk weekly with the peer support specialist and you guys get along really well. So again, it kind of can depend on the circumstances, but I would say first talk with maybe that case manager, but if you don't feel comfortable, talking with their supervisor.
Are there any supports that come with HUD-VASH for like transportation, let's say? I don't have a vehicle, or maybe I live in a really rural area. Is that something that I'm able to utilize through HUD-VASH specifically, or do I need to go a different route?
So your case manager could help with finding like transportation resources. So various communities have different, transportation supports, whether it's like, veteran specific transportation or just transportation for folks who are lower income, or other transportation resources. So I would say talk with your case manager from HUD-VASH about that. Depending on the circumstances, a case manager or a peer support specialist could also support sometimes with one-time transportation. Like if you're going to look at an apartment, at least on our end, your case manager could pick you up and take you to go look at 3 different apartments and kind of help you with transportation in that area. We kind of try to we'll work with someone on like a one-off transportation issue if somebody needs transportation to an important medical appointment or important court appointment or something like that, where it's like clinically makes sense for the case manager or for peer support to like pick someone up and take them. We can do that. But we really try to make sure people are able to like manage independently as well. So we would rather set someone up with affordable transportation resources in their community versus having them always like dependent on their HUD-VASH case manager to give them a ride. But on, one-off circumstances, they could do that.
So from what I'm hearing from you, that the case manager isn't solely just focused on providing housing for that veteran, but really providing literally everything, just about everything that veteran could need. From any type of welfare perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So especially once you're housed, your case manager is still your point of contact for, again, whatever other goals you may have. So maybe it's, now I'm housed, I want to think about finding a job, or I want to go back to school, or I want to reconnect with my family, or I want to, again, whatever that might look like to really fully work on your recovery, whatever that looks like for you. So again, that's where your case manager can help with whatever goals you might have. So it's, once someone's housed, sometimes then housing is like the last thing that we're talking about. And it can be much more like, what makes you a full, well-rounded person, and how can we support you in that?
You've got questions and we've got answers. Whether you served, are currently serving, are a caregiver, or a veteran advocate, the SITREP is your trusted source for information. Subscribe today at www.youtube.com/@VA Made Simple.